She checked into a hotel. 3 weeks later, guests were drinking her. Imagine turning on your tap one morning and the water looks a little off. The color's strange. There's an odd taste. Maybe it smells funny. You probably chalk it up to old pipes, right? That's what guests at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles told themselves for nearly 3 weeks in early 2013. Low pressure, weird taste, strange color, nothing to worry about. Until a maintenance worker climbed up to the roof to check the water tanks and found a body. Welcome back to the crime pool, the place where we don't just skim the surface of a story, we dive all the way to the bottom. I'm your host, and if you're new here, this is where we break down the most chilling, most complex, and most talked about true crime cases in the world. Homicides, disappearances, cold cases, and the ones that never quite got solved. We go deep on every detail, every suspect, every twist that the headlines missed. So if you're the kind of person who needs to know the full story, not just the parts that make it to the news, then you're exactly where you need to be. Make sure you're subscribed because trust me, you don't want to walk in halfway through. Now, let's get into it. A young woman, floating in one of the 1,000-gallon cisterns that supplied water to every room in the building. Naked, her clothes drifting beside her in the murky water. She had been there for almost 3 weeks. And what made this story go from devastating to completely haunting was the footage. Just days before her body was found, the LAPD released a grainy 4-minute surveillance clip from the hotel's elevator. The footage showed a young woman doing something that nobody, not police, not the internet, not forensic experts, could fully explain. And the moment the world saw it, this case exploded. It consumed the internet. It launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. It rewrote what people thought they knew about the Cecil Hotel. And to this day, it remains one of the most discussed, most debated, most unsettling unexplained deaths in modern history. This is the story of Elisa Lam. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we cover cases just like this every week. You do not want to miss what's coming. Who was Elisa Lam? Before we get into the dark stuff, and trust me, it gets dark, you need to know who Elisa actually was, because she was not just a headline. She was not just a viral video. She was a real person, and her story deserves more than the sensationalism that followed her death. Elisa Lam was 21 years old. She was born on April 30th, 1991 in Hong Kong, and grew up in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada, where her family ran a restaurant. By all accounts, she was bright, creative, deeply curious about the world. She had enrolled at the University of British Columbia, where she was working toward her undergraduate degree. But what really gives you a sense of who Elisa was is her blog. She ran a Tumblr called Etherfields, and the posts she left behind paint a picture of a deeply introspective young woman. She wrote about books, about travel, about her dreams for the future. She was the kind of person who saw the beauty in small moments and wasn't afraid to put her inner world into words for strangers on the internet. She was also honest, remarkably honest, about her struggles. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. She wrote openly about the difficulty of managing those conditions, about the days when the weight of it felt unbearable, and about the days when the light came back. There was nothing hidden about who she was. She was figuring herself out just like most 21-year-olds are. In January 2013, Elisa decided to take a solo trip down the California coast. It was meant to be an adventure, one of those once-in-a-lifetime journeys you take before real life catches up to you. She started in San Diego, then made her way north toward Los Angeles, with plans to eventually reach Santa Cruz. She was doing what young travelers do, exploring, soaking it all in, calling her parents every single day to let them know she was safe. She checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles on January 26, 2013. She would never check out. The hotel that eats people. Now here's the thing about the Cecil Hotel, and this is important context. This wasn't just any budget motel on the side of the freeway. This building has a history that goes so far back and runs so dark that when people found out where Elisa had been staying, it added a whole other layer to the horror. The Cecil opened in 1927 in downtown Los Angeles, right on the edge of what became known as Skid Row. For decades, it was a comfortable, affordable hotel catering to traveling salesmen and working-class guests. But over time, as the neighborhood changed and the city's social problems concentrated in that part of downtown, the Cecil changed too. It slid into decline. It became cheaper and cheaper, and the stories started piling up. Suicides, murders, more suicides. The hotel racked up so many unexplained and violent deaths over the decades that locals started calling it the Suicide Hotel. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, reportedly lived there during his murderous spree in the 1980s. Another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, is believed to have used it as a base during his time in Los Angeles. The place had become so infamous that it partly inspired the TV show American Horror Story. By 2013, part of the hotel had been rebranded as Stay on Main, a hostel-style budget option trying to attract backpackers and young travelers. Elisa booked a hostel-style room there, probably because it was affordable and centrally located. She had no idea about the hotel's history. She was just a young woman with a backpack and an itinerary and a whole trip ahead of her. Does it seem like the kind of place a solo female traveler should have been staying? Let me know what you think in the comments below. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Elisa checked in, settled into her room, and began exploring the city. She was consistent about calling her parents. That was their arrangement, a daily check-in to make sure everything was okay. But a few days into her stay, something shifted. Hotel manager Amy Price later stated in court documents that Elisa's roommates in the shared hostel room began complaining about her behavior. Price described the behavior as odd. Whatever was happening, whether it was related to her bipolar disorder, whether she wasn't sleeping properly, whether her medications weren't sitting right, it was noticeable enough that the hotel moved Elisa out of the shared room and into a private room on the same floor. Elisa kept calling her parents, and then, on January 31st, 2013, 5 days after she checked in, she was spotted by a hotel worker for the last time. That evening, she disappeared. Her family became alarmed when she missed her daily call. She also failed to check out of the hotel as scheduled. They reported her missing, and the LAPD launched an investigation. Officers searched the Cecil Hotel with K-9 units. They found nothing. No trace of Elisa, no sign of a struggle, no witnesses who saw her leave. It was like she had simply evaporated. And then, on February 14th, 2 weeks after she vanished, the LAPD made a decision that would change everything. They released the security footage. Let me try to describe it to you because words barely do it justice. The footage is from the elevator inside the Cecil Hotel. The timestamp reads January 31st, 2013, the night Elisa disappeared. She's wearing a red hoodie and black shorts. She steps into the elevator, presses several floor buttons, and then she does something strange. She moves to the corner of the elevator and presses herself against the wall, as if she's hiding from something in the hallway. She peeks out cautiously, looking in both directions, clearly checking for something, or someone. Then she steps out of the elevator into the hallway, and she starts moving her hands in wide, flowing gestures. Not like someone waving for help, more like she's communicating, performing, like she's in conversation with something only she can see. The gestures are fluid, almost dreamlike, and deeply unsettling to watch. Meanwhile, the elevator doors never close, they just stay open. Elevators have sensors designed to close after a few seconds if nothing is blocking them. But throughout this footage, the doors remain completely open. After a few minutes of this, Elisa disappears from frame. She walks out of the elevator's view, and that's it. That's the last known footage of Elisa Lam alive. The internet went absolutely insane. Drop a comment right now. What's your first reaction watching that elevator footage? Are you thinking mental health episode, foul play, or something you can't quite name? I want to know. The LAPD was handling the investigation, but from the outside it looked like they were spinning their wheels. Officers had already searched the building with dogs. They'd talked to staff. They'd canvassed the area. Nothing. The elevator footage gave them renewed public attention and a flood of tips, but none of them panned out. And then, on February 19, 2013, 19 days after Elisa disappeared, the answer came in the most disturbing way possible. Hotel guests had been complaining for days. Low water pressure, a strange odor, a weird taste coming from the taps. Maintenance worker Santiago Lopez was sent to investigate the large water tanks on the hotel's roof. 4 massive 1,000-gallon cisterns that supplied water to the entire building. He climbed up to inspect them. One of the tank hatches was open. When Lopez looked inside, he found Elisa Lam's decomposing body floating in the water. She was naked, with her clothes floating beside her. She had been there for nearly 3 weeks. Let that sink in for a second. Guests had been showering in that water, brushing their teeth, drinking it. The hotel immediately issued a do not drink order, and the LAPD cordoned off the building. The coroner was called in, and suddenly what had been a missing persons case became something else entirely. The rooftop was examined. The door leading to the roof from inside the hotel had a lock and an alarm, both reportedly functional. 3 fire escapes also offered outdoor access to the roof. To get inside one of the water tanks, a person would theoretically need to climb a 10-foot ladder on the outside of the cistern, lift a 20-pound lid, and then lower themselves inside. From the inside, there was no way to close the lid behind you. And yet, when Lopez found the tank, the hatch was closed. How did she get in there? That's the question nobody has been able to answer. The theories, and where things get strange. Okay, here's where things get strange, really strange, because the investigation produced very few concrete answers, and the vacuum that left behind was filled with some of the most intense internet sleuthing this side of the late 2000s. Let's go through the main theories. Theory 1, a mental health episode. This is the theory supported by the official coroner's ruling. Elisa had bipolar disorder and depression. She was on several prescription medications, including Wellbutrin, lamotrigine, and quetiapine, but the toxicology report found that her medication levels were lower than expected. Some mental health experts who reviewed the case publicly have suggested that if Elisa had stopped taking her medications, or if something disrupted her sleep, she could have entered a manic or psychotic episode, a state where reality becomes distorted and behavior becomes erratic. According to forensic psychotherapist Michael Drain, who has examined the Lam case, a predisposition to psychosis through a condition like bipolar disorder can be triggered by stress, lack of sleep, or inconsistent medication. In that kind of state, a person might genuinely believe they are being chased, or be responding to perceptions that nobody else can see. The behavior in the elevator, the hiding, the hand gestures, the way she keeps checking the hallway, could potentially be explained by that kind of episode. It's uncomfortable to say, but it's a medically grounded theory. But here's where that theory hits a wall. Even if Elisa was in a psychotic state, how did she physically get into that water tank? How did she climb a 10-foot ladder, lift a 20-pound lid, get inside, and then have the hatch close on top of her, all while in the middle of a mental health crisis? That part of the theory has never been satisfactorily explained. Theory 2, foul play. A lot of people, including, according to reports, former forensic experts, weren't satisfied with the accidental ruling. Dr. John Heisrott, a former deputy coroner who reviewed Elisa's autopsy publicly, noted that the findings were unusual. He pointed out that the coroner's office could not fully examine Elisa's blood due to decomposition, meaning the toxicology results were inherently incomplete. He raised the possibility, and he was clear that it was a possibility, not a conclusion, that Elisa could have been suffocated and placed in the tank after death. There were no ligature marks, no signs of physical assault. But absence of evidence, as any forensic expert will tell you, isn't always evidence of absence, especially when a body has been submerged for 3 weeks. The restricted rooftop access is what really fuels this theory. Only hotel staff were supposed to have access to the roof. Investigators believe that entering from inside would have triggered the alarm, but we don't know for certain whether the alarm was triggered that night. And we don't know for certain that no one else was with Elisa. Was someone with her that night? Does the elevator footage suggest she was hiding from someone real, not something imagined? What do you think? Does the behavior in that footage look like psychosis, or does it look like fear? Theory 3. The internet goes off the rails. Look, I have to mention this because it became a significant part of the Elisa Lam story, even though most of it is either debunked or deeply irresponsible. Shortly after the elevator footage went viral, internet communities began making wild connections. Some linked a tuberculosis outbreak in Skid Row at the time, which involved a test called LAM Elisa, to Elisa's name, calling it too strange to be a coincidence. It wasn't. LAM Elisa is simply the name of the diagnostic test, and the outbreak was a separate, unrelated public health situation. Others dug into a dark metal musician who had stayed at the hotel and pointed to his online persona as suspicious. He was investigated. He was cleared. He had nothing to do with Elisa's death, and the harassment he faced from amateur internet sleuths was severe and unfair. Some people claimed the elevator footage had been tampered with, that the timestamps were altered, that footage was removed, that the movements were too strange to be human. Experts who analyzed the footage found no credible evidence of manipulation. And of course, the supernatural theories. Some people proposed ghosts, demonic possession, interdimensional portals. The Cecil Hotel's dark reputation made those theories feel more believable than they were. But let's be honest, they're not supported by any evidence. The internet's obsession with this case brought global attention to Elisa's story, but it also brought harassment to innocent people, spread dangerous misinformation, and in some ways distracted from the real tragedy at the center of it all. A young woman died, and no one fully knows why. We're halfway through this story, and it only gets more unsettling from here. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. You can't fully understand the Elisa Lam case without understanding the Cecil Hotel, so let me give you a little more of that background, because the building itself has become almost as much of a character in this story as the people who passed through it. When it opened in the late 1920s, the Cecil was a legitimately nice hotel. Art Deco architecture, ornate lobbies, the kind of place that had ambitions. But as downtown Los Angeles shifted, the hotel got pulled along with it. By the 1950s, it had become a budget accommodation. By the 1970s and 80s, it was firmly embedded in Skid Row, one of the most concentrated areas of homelessness and poverty in the United States. The death toll at the Cecil Hotel, documented over the decades, is genuinely staggering. Multiple suicides by jumpers from upper floors. Murders within the rooms. A woman whose body went undiscovered for so long that it mummified. The hotel seemed to attract tragedy with a kind of magnetic inevitability. And then Richard Ramirez moved in. The Night Stalker, convicted of 13 murders in California, is reported by multiple sources to have lived at the Cecil during the mid-1980s while committing his crimes. A few years later, Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer who had convinced European intellectuals he was reformed, came to Los Angeles on a journalism assignment and allegedly used the Cecil as his base while murdering sex workers in the area. By the time the 2000s rolled around, the hotel had tried to reinvent itself. Part of it was rebranded as a hostel. It was cheaper, it was trying to attract a younger crowd, and for budget travelers, the location, central Los Angeles, was appealing. Elisa Lam was not the kind of person who researched hotel histories before she booked a room. She was just a young woman trying to explore California on a budget. But the Cecil's past has a way of catching up with everything that happens inside it. When Elisa disappeared, when the footage went viral, when her body was found in the water tank, the hotel's history became part of the story, whether it was relevant or not. The twist. Things that still don't add up. Okay, so here's where I want to stop and lay out the things that, even now, even after the official ruling, genuinely remain unexplained. Because the coroner said accidental drowning, and I'm not here to dismiss that. But there are details in this case that deserve to be looked at clearly. First, the water tank access. The physical reality of how Elisa could have gotten inside that tank is still not convincingly explained. You'd need to climb a 10-foot ladder on the exterior of the cistern, lift a 20-pound lid, get inside, and somehow have that lid close on top of you. In a pitch-dark rooftop in the middle of the night, while possibly in the middle of a mental health episode. The numbers don't quite add up, and that detail has haunted investigators, armchair and professional alike. Second, the elevator doors. Why didn't they close? The most common explanation offered is that someone, possibly Elisa herself, was pressing the door hold button, or that the elevator was being called to another floor. That's plausible, but it wasn't conclusively confirmed, and in the footage, it doesn't visually appear that Elisa is pressing anything inside the elevator while she's in the hallway. Third, the footage timestamp. Multiple people online claimed the footage appeared slowed down or edited. The LAPD maintained that the footage was real and unaltered, though they acknowledged it may have been slightly slowed when uploaded. This explanation was never fully satisfying to skeptics. Fourth, the missing footage. The elevator footage that was released is approximately 4 minutes long, but investigators also reviewed footage from other cameras in the hotel. That additional footage has never been publicly released. What does it show? Was Elisa alone? Was anyone else on that floor that night? We simply don't know. And fifth, perhaps the most quietly disturbing detail of all, Elisa's personal medications. The toxicology report found that her prescribed medication levels were lower than expected for someone who had supposedly been taking them regularly. There were also pills found among her belongings. The question this raises is difficult to answer. Had she stopped taking her medication? Was she self-managing? Was something else affecting how the medications were absorbed? The coroner listed bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor in her death, but the exact mechanism of how that disorder led to her drowning in a sealed water tank remains, in medical terms, unclear. Here's the question I keep coming back to. If this was purely an accidental death triggered by a mental health episode, why have so many forensic experts publicly stated their discomfort with the ruling? Why did the coroner's office initially list the cause of death as undetermined before changing it? And why does virtually every person who watches that elevator footage walk away with a feeling that something isn't right? I'm not saying it was murder. I'm not saying it was supernatural. I'm saying something happened in the Cecil Hotel on the night of January 31st, 2013, and we don't fully know what it was. Share this video with someone who loves true crime. This case deserves to be talked about. And if you've got a theory of your own, I genuinely want to hear it in the comments. On June 20th, 2013, nearly 5 months after Elisa was last seen alive, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office released its final ruling. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Manner, accident. Contributing factor, bipolar disorder. The autopsy found no evidence of physical trauma, no signs of sexual assault, No evidence of strangulation or any other form of violence. The toxicology report found no illicit drugs or alcohol in Elisa's system, only trace amounts of her prescribed medications, which were present at lower than expected levels. The coroner's office noted significant limitations in the examination. Elisa's body had been submerged in water for nearly 3 weeks. Decomposition had progressed to the point where certain tests, particularly those relying on blood analysis, could not be fully completed. This meant that the toxicology results, while informative, weren't the comprehensive picture they would have been if her body had been found sooner. LAPD closed the investigation. No suspects were ever named. No arrests were ever made. The case was marked accidental death, but the public and several forensic professionals weren't convinced. Dr. Hissarat, the former deputy coroner who reviewed the autopsy, publicly stated that he believed the more appropriate ruling would have been undetermined, given the questions that remained unanswered. He wasn't alone. Commentators, investigators, and mental health experts all flagged the same unresolved puzzle. How, physically, did Elisa end up in that tank? The LAPD and the coroner's office declined further comment. Elisa's family, who had been through an unimaginable ordeal, retreated from the public eye. They have never publicly spoken in detail about their daughter's death or the investigation's conclusions. And the Cecil Hotel? It continued to operate. It eventually tried to rebrand again. As of the mid-2020s, the building has been listed for sale as part of an affordable housing project. The water tanks on the roof, reportedly, were replaced. The impact of Elisa Lam's death rippled outward in ways that nobody could have predicted. For the internet, this case became a kind of watershed moment for true crime online communities. The elevator footage was the first major viral true crime clip of the social media era, a single piece of evidence that bypassed traditional media entirely and went straight to mass public consumption. Within days, millions of people around the world were watching it, analyzing it, forming theories, fighting about it in comment sections. In some ways, what happened online after the footage was released showed the best and worst of internet culture simultaneously. The best: genuine, careful analysis by people who cared about finding the truth. Public pressure that kept the case in the news and forced investigators to keep talking about it. A global outpouring of grief for a young woman whom most people had never heard of before. The worst: targeted harassment of innocent individuals who had nothing to do with Elisa's death. The spread of misinformation so viral that people still believe debunked theories today. The reduction of a complex human tragedy to a meme, to a creepypasta, to content. Elisa Lam was a person. Her death became a product. In 2021, Netflix released a 4-part documentary series called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, directed by Joe Berlinger. The series took a measured approach to the case, interviewing hotel staff, investigators, and the internet sleuths themselves. It pushed back on the most outlandish theories while acknowledging the genuine questions that remained unanswered. It humanized Elisa, something much of the earlier coverage had failed to do. And it took an honest look at how the internet's obsession with the case had real consequences for real people. For mental health advocates, the case raised important conversations about how we talk about mental illness in the context of crime and tragedy. The framing of Elisa's bipolar disorder as a contributing factor in her death, while medically accurate according to the coroner, struck some advocates as reductive. Millions of people live with bipolar disorder and depression. The overwhelming majority of them are not in danger of accidentally drowning in water tanks. The specifics of Elisa's case were unique, and context matters enormously. For the families of solo female travelers, the case was a sobering reminder of vulnerability, not just from external threats, but from the unpredictability of mental health in unfamiliar environments. The isolation of traveling alone, the disruption of routine, the stress of new places. For someone managing a complex condition, these factors can stack up. And for Elisa's parents, David and Elisa Lam, the aftermath was something no family should ever have to face. Their daughter went on a trip. She was supposed to come home. Instead, they received a phone call every parent dreads, and then they were pulled into one of the most publicized and mishandled media circuses in true crime history. They have mostly stayed silent, and honestly, that silence speaks volumes. The question that remains. Elisa Lam checked into the Cecil Hotel on January 26, 2013. She was 21 years old. She had a blog where she wrote about books and life and the complicated work of being human. She called her parents every day because she loved them and wanted them to know she was safe. On January 31st, she stepped into an elevator and the world watched what happened next, and still can't agree on what it means. 19 days later, a maintenance worker found her body in a water tank on the roof of a building known for swallowing people whole. The coroner said, accidental. The investigators said, no foul play. The case was closed. And yet, the elevator doors that wouldn't close, the 20-pound lid, the alarm that may or may not have gone off, the medication levels that were lower than expected, the footage that was never fully released to the public, the question of whether anyone else was in that hotel that night who shouldn't have been. The official answer is, she fell. She was unwell. She climbed up there somehow, in the dark, in a state of crisis, and she fell into the water and she couldn't get out. Maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe the truth really is that simple and that heartbreaking. But here's the thing about the Elisa Lam case, the thing that keeps bringing people back to it 12 years later. It's not the conspiracy theories. It's not the supernatural speculation. It's the feeling. The feeling you get when you watch that footage, when you sit with the unanswered questions, when you look at everything the investigation produced and realize how many gaps are still there. The feeling that we don't know the full truth, that maybe we never will. And so I'll leave you with the same question that has haunted this case since the moment that elevator footage went public. If you were standing in that hallway on the night of January 31st, 2013, watching Elisa move her hands in the air, watching the elevator doors stand open, watching her disappear around the corner, what would you have seen? A young woman in the grip of a mental health crisis, alone and frightened in a hotel that had already swallowed so many people before her, or something else? Rest in peace, Elisa Lam. You deserved so much better than what this world gave you. Tell me your theory in the comments. Do you believe the official ruling, or does something still feel off to you? I read every single comment. If this video meant something to you, please like it and share it. It helps more people find this story, and Elisa's story deserves to be remembered. Subscribe for a new true crime deep dive every week. We don't chase clicks. We tell the full story. See you in the next one.